At the end of the day, they ended up getting drug into a Silence of the Lambs style hole with Tucker Carlson playing the role of Leatherface and basically passing around the hose of outrage. And I think, at the end of the day, it was all to avoid that. And there must be some people over there who are just going, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. Oh, for God's sakes, burn it all. And we're going to go get Maya Rudolph. And I think it's funny because, I don't think this has any bearing on kind of brand purpose or how you build brands in the long term, because at the end of the day, this is the articulation of a brand more so than the foundations and the purpose and where it wants to play and what it does.
Welcome to Punchy by Rival, where we take the gloves off to share the hard-hitting realities of the challenger marketing world. Each week, we'll break down the buzz and cut through the BS of the top stories and trends to tell you what you really need to know and do differently to grow your brand and career. All right, welcome to the new Punchy. So as I mentioned the last time, although we did have a week break last week because Dubose and I took a very last minute, very quick trip down to Dubai. So we had 24 hours in the sun down there, although I guess we didn't get too much sunshine, did we, Dubose? But yeah, more going on for Rival in the Middle East. So no Punchy last week, but we are back with a fantastic guest, fantastic story to cover off this week. And again, what we're doing, the tweak that we've made is instead of kind of going into 3 or 4 different stories every week, we're taking the one that we think is most relevant, but also probably like the one that's most important to wrap your head around and understand if you're a marketer out there. And we're going to give you a bit of a briefing, but of course you can go read up on the story and get the more information from someone else. We're going to give you a couple opinions and potentially hot takes on these topics. So first of all, our guest today, Will Minimum Lovable Jones. How are you doing? You're going to have to explain that inside joke for people.
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, it's really great to be on. Obviously, listeners don't know this. We used to work together for a little while, and it's good to see you again.
Yeah, and the Minimum Lovable comment. So Will and his design team over at 11FS have this fantastic perspective and framework for developing minimum lovable brands for the greenfield proposition work that they do. And I always love that. So yeah, that's, I guess, your nickname now. All right. Our story for this week, M&Ms has pulled their spokescandies, which we all know, but there has actually been a good amount of right-wing outrage at this, which file this under people have too much time on their hands right now. But candy maker Mars said it is replacing its M&Ms spokescandies with actress Maya Rudolph. And there's been a lot of right-wing hubbub and criticism about it. So Rudolph will star in the candy brand's upcoming Super Bowl commercial, but some conservatives, including Fox News host Tucker Carlson, claim the makeovers the mascots got last year, including new shoes and personalities, were an example of the liberal agenda gone too far. Mars in December said it would return to the Super Bowl ad slate with 30-second commercial. And this brings up, of course, the bigger conversation around how do you keep evolving brand design when you're constantly under scrutiny? It seems like it's either going to be the left wing or the right wing that has a problem with kind of how you make these changes. Designing for woke and non-woke, how do you navigate this if you're a CMO, if you're a brand marketer in the world of 2022? Dubose, I'm going to start with you.
So I think there's a few things there. I think first there's the idea of woke versus non-woke is an unhelpful distinction in this. I think the challenge is overall.
I actually don't even think non-woke is a thing, so I just made that up. You're right.
Is it a sleep? It's just woke and woke and whatever its antithetical kind of pole is. I think the thing I find that's interesting about all of this is, at the end of the day, is the worst thing possible someone arguing about your mascot being too sexy or having shoes? Or is that actually the worst thing ever that you've made things no one cares about? Because I think at the end of the day, for every brand that's like, oh, this is a pain and we have to deal with this, there are probably thousands of brands that are like, we've made our logo sexier and no one has even noticed. They're probably phoning Tucker Carlson in the middle of the night in breathy calls to send over advertising stimulus. And I think at the end of the day, you're never going to be able to please everyone. If you've been noticed, if you have something that actually has a point, you're going to anger someone. It's the purpose of the internet, right? Like there's always going to be someone who's annoyed. And I think the key thing for M&Ms here is really down to the idea of who buys these things? Who are you building this for? because I think, yes, M&Ms are a mass product. They're for a lot of people. But at a certain point when you're in a situation like this, you kind of have to make a call. It's like that old Simpsons episode where Milhouse gets divorced and he gets fired from the cracker factory because the boss at the cracker factory he works at goes, crackers are a family food. And he goes, to single people buy crackers. And the guy goes, I don't care to know. And I think it's that idea that at a certain point, there's going to be a sacrifice somewhere. And I think what we're seeing here is M&M's trying to walk away from it completely by doing the equivalent of just kind of lighting the house on fire and then inviting Maya Rudolph to live next door. So I think, it's a shame, whereas I think actually this could have been a real kind of opinion to go, where is growth going to come from M&M's and who do they need to appeal to?
So there is part of the industry rumor mill that thinks that maybe this is part of an elaborate PR strategy to get M&Ms talked about, particularly ahead of the Super Bowl ad. It used to be that there was just the Super Bowl ad, and then there's the teaser or the release of the Super Bowl ad before the Super Bowl ad. And now is there even a PR strategy to get buzz before the release of the ad, before the actual Super Bowl? But I guess it's also interesting, and I think about, the Nike Colin Kaepernick type thing that they did, which of course appealed to a lot of their customer base, but also turned off a lot of their customer base. And it's, M&M's is different than, I don't know, let's say Tesla. Like M&M's is everywhere and for everyone, right? And so Dubose, do you think that this is them kind of taking a stand, or are they trying to kind of like appeal to everyone and it's just kind of not really working?
I think this is the equivalent of them walking away from taking a stand, because at the end of the day, no matter what they did with their band of personality infused M&Ms, there was always going to be someone that was angry. And I think even if you look at the way the press release was done, it's that idea of going, look, some of you like this, some of you hate this. It's gone now completely. Here's Maya Rudolph. And I think at the end of the day, the hope is everyone just kind of forgets and then resets. But I think attitudes and perception don't work like that. I think to the point of, is this a Super Bowl ad? Is this a Super Bowl ploy? If it is, someone has definitely got a higher appetite for risk than I would have. Because at the end of the day, I don't know how many people are sitting around watching the Super Bowl going, did you see that M&M's had an interesting take on the culture wars? And now they brought Maya Rudolph in. I'd like to speak to you about that while we're watching the game. Instead of going, there are ways to entertain, there are ways to capture attention that don't have to go like this. I think this is them looking at brand tracking at some level and going, we don't know how to get out of this. This is a catch-22. We're going to walk backwards until no one ever thinks we were here.
Well, your thoughts, please.
It's a really interesting one, this. I mean, I first want to point out that I hate the word spokescandies. It needs to go away, and it just needs saying. I think it's interesting even personifying sweets that you're going to then eat. It's weird. Like candy or sweets are saying, you've got this idea that you either give the sweets a personality or you introduce a cartoon character that's then going to be the people eating the sweets, having a great time, and tells them how to enjoy them. That's quite like a safe world. In fact, just subbing in a celebrity, a person that's fallible like the rest of us, is so much more risky than anything they could have done to the cartoon characters. All it takes is her to be involved in a scandal, and they've pinned everything on someone that's going to have such an effect on their fortunes. So that I feel like is a bit of a mistake. I mean, I know a global brand who a few years back were about to have Kevin Spacey as their front person. They've done incredibly well with their replacement, who's like a lovable British comedian. But this is another example, I guess, when you pin it to someone. I know it's different to the Nike Association, because you've already seen someone stand for something and you're trying to gain some of that from that person. What they've tried to do here now, I don't know her particularly well, but I don't believe she stands for anything in a particularly strong way. So it's not virtue signaling anything particularly. It's trying to be safe. And actually, the other side of this is they've changed a cartoon character. People hate that. If you're watching a series of something and they change it, people are going to have an issue with that, whether you've heavy-handedly tried to make them woke or whether you haven't. Because actually, have you had a look at how they've done it? No one's turning up to see a cartoon character going, I really want to stand for women. That's cool, but just have it come out more subtly. Like, we're all on board with what they're trying to do, I think, in terms of this is they're trying to stand for something, but guys, be more subtle. There's a way that this is entertaining and fun. You're about fun, and this isn't fun at all.
Are there any other spokes candies?
It's a great question.
I feel like M&Ms are the best known ones. Are there any others? We'll let producer Varen do a quick Google and drop it in the chat and come back to that question. But I totally agree with you. It was always kind of weird that they were alive to begin with. Jenna, what do you think about this?
When you were introducing the new format this week, just a couple of minutes ago, you were like, this is like the most important story of the week in marketing. And I just want to point out that the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit to break up Google this week. And we're saying sexy M&Ms are the most important heavy hitting thing. I really like that.
I guess
find
it
that really
depends
delightful.
on how you define important, but everybody's got their own opinion. It's probably not important. It's probably like, we've only done 2 episodes in this new format. ChatGPT, this one is probably like the most talked about, right? It's
no,
like
I know. I just
and
thought
that
it
one
was
should
really
be.
funny.
That one should be, and maybe next week it will be, or maybe one of us has a rant or a rave about it. You never know.
You never know who might have a worry about that. No, I do think that this actually is all right. Fine, this is sexy M&Ms are important. I'll concede it. But Will, I kind of disagree that this was like M&Ms having like mishandled, like trying to take a stand on something originally. I think that like the genesis of this was like months ago, or like maybe it was even like longer ago now. I don't really have a good sense of time. That they replaced the green M&M, who, to your point about how it's weird to personify candy, it's weird to make personified candy sexy. It was weird that in the 90s, the M&Ms had what was supposed to be a hot lady M&M, that the 2 main M&Ms openly lusted after in their cartoon or in their commercials, and that M&Ms just like updated that person to be a little bit more neutral. Again, that they were like trying, I think, to like step away from like a weird, like kind of like gross choice that they made previously. They're like, oh, maybe that's kind of an odd thing that we've done. And that, Tucker Carlson really objected to not being able to be openly attracted to a cartoon character. And it became like this whole thing. I think that, this is just kind of Mars tried really hard to be like a non-stance, like neutral company, like through the ages. But what is neutral changes over time, and you do eventually have to catch up to that. And that they just got like ridiculously unlucky that they happened to lose like culture war roulette about whatever outrage Fox News was trying to generate in the culture wars that week. Like, ooh, tough luck, Mars. Like I don't know, Mars, I think like is being sued for child slavery in their chocolate production. So it's hard for me to feel that bad for them, but like, yeah.
I mean,
That's what I think about this.
You raise a really good point there, Jenna, which is like, I think this is one of those weird laws of unintended consequences. The thing they were trying to avoid is the thing that landed them in this. At the end of the day, they ended up getting drug into a Silence of the Lambs style hole with Tucker Carlson playing the role of Leatherface, and basically passing around the hose of outrage. And I think, at the end of the day, it was all to avoid that. And there must be some people over there who are just going, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. Oh, for God's sakes, burn it all. And we're going to go get Maya Rudolph. And I think it's funny because, I don't think this has any bearing on kind of brand purpose or how you build brands in the long term, because at the end of the day, this is the articulation of a brand more so than the foundations and the purpose and where it wants to play and what it does. I think it's funny because you go for something like M&Ms. I think they've put so much equity into, now that you've mentioned spokes candies, Will, I also find it very, very odd, but they put so much equity into what would be referred to as the distinctive assets like that. The changing those in the absence of anything else that people know about the brand is going to be the thing that M&Ms does that they know about. And I think it's interesting because I'd be intrigued to know like what kind of use cases do people, does M&Ms want you to kind of use them in now? Who do they want to buy it? There's kind of those things versus just whether or not is it the purple M&M that had sexy legs or whatever it was? And I think if that's the biggest thing about the brand, you're like, I think there's some brand researchers who their tracking has absolutely just been nuked from space at this point on the attributes they're measuring.
Are they in M&M's world? The spokescandies? Do they have is it like a Disney World?
No, they come into the into the real world, right? They interact with people. I'm thinking of the Super Bowl spot last year. I think they were wasn't it a celebrity? I can't remember.
That's CGI. They're not real.
They're not.
Imagine how terrifying it would be if a large M&M actually knocked it. Is it musculature? What are the arms made of, Eric? It's they would be unkillable, first off. So
nougat.
Stuff of nightmares.
Nougat.
They've got strawberry laces for tendons. It's actually quite anatomical.
I would buy that.
But here's my question, I guess. Mars, M&Ms, one of the most known brands in the world. They're always going to be under the spotlight. But even if you're not, I feel like people listening, marketers out there can probably relate. It can be very tricky and sensitive to navigate this stuff, even if you have good intentions. So, how do we think about that? Is it something where we're saying brands actually should take a stand? They should be more than Nike and they should just be more differentiated with what they say they stand for and just take the real losses on the people that don't respect that or don't agree with it, but take the real wins on the side that do, matter more to less people? Or is it something where it seems like what Mars has done, but done poorly, and then, lost the chat roulette culture war wheel game of you try to kind of stay in the middle and not piss off anyone and just hope that Tucker Carlson doesn't catch on to you? What do we think the approach is? What do we think? How should marketers be thinking about things like this that could potentially be sensitive, and whether or not they should embrace it or try to step away from it?
I think wading into it heavy-handed without actually understanding what's your brand permission to get involved in these things, because you're basically trying to understand what the spirit of the age is. What's everyone concerned about? What are the conversations around some of these topics? To do it right, firstly, can I insert myself into that conversation and still feel authentic? For a lot of brands, probably not. And then how do I actually do that? And do I have a role in doing that? For Mars, maybe it's not. And if I gave the impression that I don't think it's a good thing to try and remove a sexy M&M from a brand that is marketed to children earlier, I just want to dispel that. All I'm saying is it effectively, there's other ways to do that for them. I think it's, a good thing, heavy-handed. But ultimately, it's try and insert yourself into a conversation in an authentic way if you're able to as a brand, but just accept when you are not, because ultimately you can perhaps do things with campaign that you can't do that's totally integral to your brand. Do you know what I mean? There's ways to direct this stuff to the right audiences without fundamentally changing who you are.
I think to that point, at the end of the day, branding is a tool for behavior change in sales, right? It's the long-term orientation of the audience, the assets, the value you're providing, so that you can gain relevance, so that you can stand out in the market, and so that you can, go where you need to go as a business. And I think, it's interesting that when people get caught up in, Eric, you used the term earlier, good intentions. And I think one of the things I find quite interesting when we talk about branding and purpose is the idea that good intentions are probably the worst thing you can have there, because at the end of the day, you can go in with the best of intentions to try to do something, but either not vet it properly, not integrate it into the business, not understand the value you're providing, or not understand the nuances of the issues you're attempting to associate yourself to. I think there was a study that kind of showed that purpose driven campaigns and purpose driven brands either did really well or really badly. And I think it is that U shape of kind of, because we're doing the right thing, this will work, is a really, really bad way to go through business, versus the idea of how do we integrate positive things to our bottom line and our balance sheet. It's I know we've talked about this before in brand planning around purpose, but I only believe a brand's purpose, societal impact kind of orientation towards the world when it's integral to their business model, because then they're not going to walk away from it, and they've thought about it. I think when things kind of get tacked on around the side, it gets a bit tricky. And And, this is one of those. It's not like there's anything fundamentally that's changed. We're moving around chairs on the communications Titanic at the moment, kind of adding legs, taking away sexy legs, those types of things. Whereas I think to Jenna's point, the conversation that should probably be had here is where is the societal impact, the purpose, and the kind of thinking on the operations that are closer to the balance sheet.
Any last thoughts on this before we move on to rants and raves?
Just imagine when Tucker Carlson discovers Mr. Clean.
Or the brawny paper towel guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, there are no other spokescandies. I've been Googling it over here. So I think now there are none, actually.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Will.
I think, look, there's clearly fans of the M&M people out there. For a start, there's M&M Worlds, which is mind-blowing to me, how you can enjoy a certain candy that much that you're willing to go into a store and have photos and buy a bum bag with an M&M on it.
A custom M&M is cool. I kind of like having my name on an M&M. I think that's kind of fun.
Exactly.
I've never been in the M&M world, but I do like a custom M&M. Sometimes, when they have them as party favors, I appreciate that. Yeah.
And I think in general, back when they made the decisions to have sexy ones and have those personalities for a product that's marketed to children was a misstep anyway. But I think that all you have to do is get rid of all of them and maybe introduce the children of those M&Ms who happen to be, there's a nice way so you don't piss people off to just go, forget about those. They've retired. Here's some fresh ones. I don't know. It's could also be a weird one, but
I don't know that Mars wants people Googling Mars and children right now due to the aforementioned lawsuit about the use of child slaves in their chocolate production. So maybe that might be an example of like when marketing needs to talk to the core balance sheets. We'll see if that happens, though. It might be like that Boris Johnson, bus SEO trick that he pulled.
But I think there is an interesting point here because it is the S Club Juniors approach, right? At the end of the day, just go next generation down and hope the sins of the M&M fathers and mothers haven't been passed on to the kids.
Yeah, the S Club Juniors effect, as it'll be known.
Yeah, the Saved by the Bell college years for our American listeners who are wondering about S Club.
Yeah, I actually don't know that reference either. I'll have to look that up.
Not worth Googling.
Well, too late. Let's wrap it up with rants and raves. Jenna, I think you've got something probably equally, maybe a little bit less important to talk about, but we'll give you space anyway.
Rave, the United States Department of Justice, just filed a serious antitrust lawsuit seeking the divestiture of Google's ad business and accusing in a very interesting, there's a 6-minute video of the Attorney General, I believe, giving a speech on this about the uncompetitive business practices and history of uncompetitive acquisitions that Google has made over the past several years, and that they are going to break it up. Unsure if they will actually be successful, but it's certain to be a battle of the titans. We'll see. I don't know.
Still positive progress, right? Steps in the right direction.
Positive progress. And fans of legal meme accounts and obscure legal blogs on the internet that write about antitrust case, settle in for an interesting several years of content. I personally am really looking forward to it. Rave.
Like Bob Loblaw's Law Blog?
Exactly like that. Yes. The Bob Law blog.
Arrested Development reference there. Just to keep up with The Simpsons. Technically, it's 1 and 1 this year. We have one Arrested Development reference and one Simpsons reference. So, Dubose, I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you work another Simpsons reference into your rant or rave? Knowing you.
Well, we are a Simpsons household, Eric, and that will not change. I think you'll find the Arrested Development references are more of a Shelbyville idea. And no, sir, we don't like it.
I do not think I have ever seen a full episode of The Simpsons. Just putting that out
there.
They're
25 minutes long. Just, power through. It's maybe 20 with advertisements. So you're there.
I'll think about it.
They were defining cultural touchstone moments for a while, Eric. I'm not with you on this one. You've lost me.
TV.
Yeah.
And actually, to be completely fair, on I was going to talk about Super Bowl advertising. I will do that when it starts to come out. But I think you raise a really interesting point about The Simpsons, which ties back to M&Ms. Because I think there is an interesting thing on the idea of the sliding scale of culture. Because we've talked about the idea of culture and where you want to position your brand in it, and then how you kind of orient to get different audiences or different conversations. But I think it is worth thinking about the idea that culture is a completely malleable and changeable thing more than we notice. Like The Simpsons are hilarious because when they first came out in the early 90s, I believe it was the first lady, Barbara Bush, actually said it was destroying the fabric of society. Whereas nowadays you would kind of go, actually, there's nothing in it that could be classified as in any way offensive comparatively to most content nowadays. And I think there's an interesting thing there, especially when we talk about kind of M&Ms, because you have an asset, you have these spokescandies that you've been running basically since The Simpsons was seen as offensive. And then you tried to make them less offensive and got into trouble. And I think there's an irony there. Whereas you look at something like The Simpsons, they've just carried on, and over time they became tame. So maybe there is something to be said for setting the long-term objective, and then the rest of the world will just catch up with where you want to go.
So is that a Simpsons rave? How do we?
Yeah, like every now and then I'm going to do a Simpsons rave. I'll also just recommend a random Simpsons episode. Tales of Springfield. You should probably start there. Or the monorail episode is obviously the best thing ever written. And Conan O'Brien apparently gets it mentioned to him once a day. So.
All right. You've talked about the monorail episode enough. I will watch that this weekend and report back on next week's Punchy. Will, take us home. What thing do you want to rant or rave about? Ideally marketing related, but as you can see, we can really talk about what you want.
I want to rant about marketing agencies that specialize in Web3 or the metaverse. Now, you've all seen them pop up, and they all look exactly the same. They've got 3D things. They've got, it's dark, it's sexy. No one really understands what we do. To the monorail reference, it's jazz hands and going, you want a bit of this, you want a monorail. Monorail comes along, and you're like, well, this isn't what I thought it was at all. And they need to try harder. For a marketing agency, it's not enough to just look the part and try and use some buzzwords. If you can't market yourself, what can you do? No one's buying that from you. It annoys me, and I really want to understand exactly how they feel like the differentiating by fitting in and having a Web3 look. I'm also not a big fan of the I'm a generic NFT look type thing, and yeah, don't get me started on NFTs. It's not art. A rambling rant there, but
we'll come back on and do an NFT episode with us for real. We'll take a dump on NFTs. Yeah,
would love to.
We could do. I mean, to be honest, with some of the guests that we've had, we could do kind of like a Hall of Fame NFT dump episode at some point, because I think there's a lot of opinions to go around. All right. I think that's all the time that we have for today. Will, thank you so much for making the time and hanging out with us. And we'll leave it there. So until next week, thanks for listening. Goodbye. Punchy is a production of Rival. We are a growth consultancy that builds challenger brands, strategies, and capabilities to disrupt categories. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with Jenna, Dubose, or myself, email us at media@wearerival.com or find us on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and leave us a review. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.